Hi, I'm Tim of WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. Reporting from Geneva, I'm going to introduce a guy who needs no introduction, probably the most famous young watchmaker in the world. It's Rexhep Rexhepi. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, we've spoken in the last year. We were at Dubai Watch Week almost exactly 1 year ago. Could you get us up to speed? Let us know what have been the major developments in your life and your business over the last year. Obviously, there's a new addition coming to your family, so congratulations for that.
Thank you very much.
On the watchmaking side, what is the current events?
So yeah, we released now the RCC2, it was a long work, I think, this watch represents a lot because, we tried many way of doing, so we started to using conventional machines, so the case, it's really done in-house, so this it's a big step for us, so this first watches in this collection, all the case were done by hand in-house, so it's a big step for us, so represent that we want to evolve.
Now, the watch is incredible. You had the only watch version that came out in 2021. That gave us an idea of what to expect, but the production model is now available, and it's full of subtleties, because I noticed in profile, unbranded crown, asymmetrical case and bezel, beautiful soldered-on lugs. Talk a little bit about how you design a watch, because you mentioned specifically that this was something you envisioned very early on.
Yeah, every time I liked, to having something different. And for sure, when you're doing a classic watch, I think it's a little more complex to bring your identity. We started also with the AK line. We had this bezel asymmetric, oval, this shape, it's tonal, but round. So I wanted to having something very subtle. And this is why, I found very interesting to having this bezel here, because you have round case, you have oval bezel, and you had to put the two together, and by constraint give you a line who following really the lugs. And what I like, had to having the crown in the middle of the case, so you play with all this line to having something very balanced. And I like, because if you look at the case, the back, and the bezel, all of three are the 30% of the watch. You know what I mean? So one of third of the watch. So I like, because make it a watch very balanced. So
it's almost fluid. It's almost like it's liquid, and it has a flowing pattern to it.
Yeah, true.
The lugs are also a little bit finer and maybe more tightly curved, thinner too.
Are a little more thinner, a little more longer. When everybody talking about long lugs, but it's true. But you have this here for the strap. You have we have 19 millimeters. So when you look at like this, looks like long. But when you put it in the wrist, I like, because they following really your wrist. It's very comfortable. So this is why we did this lugs. You can have a big wrist, small wrist, correspond to everybody.
Now, speaking of vertical integration, you have the ability to make that case in-house. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of being able to control the process, which includes bridges, plates, wheels, yes, but also the case itself and how that's done in-house at Akrivia.
I'm 35, so I don't really have the knowledge that maybe some crazy watchmaker had. So my challenge is to trying to find people who can transmit me, and you have to learn. And I think one of the things who push you to learn more and to do it better is to try, So this is why, honestly, I'm trying to challenge myself and starting to doing things in-house. And this push you, and you want to realize, and you learn, And this give you more open, you open a little more your mind, and you realize that you can try this give you other ideas. When you practice, it's push you.
And it keeps production low. You're making, 40 to 50 watches a year at most between Akrivia and Rexhep Rexhepi. Now, folks who wonder why there are two separate names within the same relatively small company, not relatively, objectively small company, why have the more extravagant, large, sporty Akrivias and the more classical Rexhep Rexhepis, given that it is one atelier?
So, we are young today, and we evolve in life. So I think we can't say, oh, my watch like this or like this. Sometimes you wake up, you want to wear something different. In your life, sometimes you like more classic watches. So my education was classic, and when I started with this Akrivia case, I wanted to do something totally different, But at this time, honestly, was a little more complex because, when you're doing something different, was a little more complex to make people understanding, And what I found very interesting, and I think it's different. It's sport. It's very aggressive, and a lot of identity. But this is what I was and I am, So I want just to do something different with the skills I learned in Patek and other companies. So traditional movement, good finishing, but I think quite a modern case.
Now, one thing I have noticed is that with the AK-06 here, you have a 41 millimeter case. The previous, I want to say AK-01 through 5, they were larger 43 millimeter cases. So you still kept the more extravagant and modern Akrivia shape, but you kind of changed with the times to make it a little smaller. Was that to suit your tastes, or was this something that collectors specifically requested?
No, I say before I'm very selfish because I wanted to do my watch, So I think, I started to do something to be independent because I wanted to express what I. So it's true, when we're talking about diameters now, 42.5 millimeters, 41.5 millimeters, looks like big, but at the end is not so big because the locks and the proportion are, I think, quite well done that you think it's like, visually, you think it's like a 39. And I think most of the collector and people say me this, when they see in the picture, they realize that they think it's bigger, but in reality, when we saw, it's quite small and delicate.
There is something to be said for the shape of a case mattering more than the size of a case, and that's certainly one of, I guess, the important lessons I try to convey with the videos I shoot, which is that you really need to try it on and see it in person, because photos never do justice. The tonneau case looks huge on the AK-06 until it's on your wrist, then it looks beautifully proportioned. Do you ever go to collectors with prototypes and say, like, hey, let's try this on, give me feedback? Or do you just say, it's entirely me, I'm going to make you an offer, and you're going to accept or decline?
I think you have to really to try to concentrate yourself to taking this decision, because I think, sometimes I spoke too much about soul and but it's really important that your watch is what you are, and for sure, they can give you a lot of advice. And some of the collectors can give me some advice, and really I can listen, but had to correspond to me. And really I'm trying to push myself to not following what people waiting, It's different, It's really different. You can't say that this remind you another watch, So I think it's really
original.
Yeah, it's original.
And the other thing that's interesting is with the success of Rexhep Rexhepi as a sub-brand, people have come back, and now Akrivia is finding the success and the acceptance and the demand that you dreamed about in 2013, 14, 15. That it's almost as though people have come full circle. Now they're returning to the original brand and finding out just how appealing these watches are. And maybe they were unwilling to take that step until the more classical watch came out. Now they're looking at more extravagant variants of your design ethic as though this is new and this is traditional, whereas this is the new model and this is where you've been the whole time.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you're redesigning a classic? The Chronomètre Contemporain came out in 2018 and it was immediately a hit. You built it for a very short period of time before deciding to redesign it. Talk to me about the changes you made within the movement, because I think that's where the most obvious changes have occurred.
Yeah, so, it's... I'm trying to, when I started with the Chronomètre Contemporain 1, I did a movement, hour, minute, and second, very classic. And, the idea was to doing just another version with different color. And, I worked and I started to work on it, and I say, I wanted to challenge myself, why you should following something or easy, And I realized that I don't want, I wanted to do something different, to try, and this is why I think I have to find a movement who can't really change that much the aesthetic because it's in the same collection. So I think when you saw the watch, you can realize that it's in the collection of the Chronomètre Contemporain, but it's totally new movement because you have two trainer wheel. We have one trainer wheel who give the right time, and we have another trainer wheel come to take the information and give us the dead beat second, the minute, and the hour. So what is interesting, you don't have any constraint on the movement. This movement will push you the other, but not, you don't put a mechanism on movement. You know what I mean?
Yes,
So
it's fully integrated.
yes, it's not working versus your movement, but it will help. So this is what I like. And you know, all the hands are minutary, we call, I don't know how you call it, but the minutary and the hands, you know, the weights, we put in the other movement. So like this, you don't have any other constraint in the movement who give you the right time.
So now what you've really done here is you've added the deadbeat seconds, but that's maybe not as important as the fact that you've added a second barrel and an independent drivetrain, so you still have a very good power reserve in spite of the deadbeat.
Yes, yes, because we have 84 hours of power reserve. And again, okay, so you have, it's a complex mechanism because when you see it, it looks like simple, but you know, you have the stop balance, the reset second. And you know, for doing this, you have, and I'm sure that you maybe you know it, because you have to stop the balance, okay? You have to put the security on the wheel of the second wheel, because depending the way your hammer going, your heart is, in some way you can have the play of the teeth. So you have really to synchronize this, and after that you have the hammer coming on the heart of the second.
For the zero reset.
Yes. So it's quite complex. It's all of these mechanisms under the dial, but
So it's almost like you've got some of the elements, you know, just for our audience, you've got the jumping second, but then you've also got almost a reset system like a chronograph to recenter that hand. So when you stop the movement, it zeroes the second to the index at 60, and now you can set precisely against a reference time.
exactly. Because also it's a deadbeat second, so you have to. Because if it come back to zero, and if you have to play, you will have your hand is
Yes.
between this, you know.
Yeah, no one wants that.
No, because it's deadbeat.
And now what's really great here is that it's not just that the mechanism is more complicated. You've paid a lot of attention, and this is really where your watches all have a lot in common, whether Akrivia or Rexhep Rexhepi. Symmetry has been so important. This isn't necessarily the way they're finished. It's the shape of the pieces, the arrangements relative to each other, the proportions. It's almost like I'm looking at a map, and the map is very even, symmetrical, and almost like a mirror when I look from side to side on either of these watches. Do you design the movement before you design the watch?
Yes, because I think, you know, for a watchmaker, you know, when you're doing your school, you don't really doing designs and things like that. So I think for the movement today, for me, it's a little more easy than to doing the keys and the dials, you know. But yeah, I think it's a little more easy for me to doing the movement. So I start, lately I started doing the keys and the dial, but the movement I know will be a little more quick. So I had already in mind, for the movement, I have already my ideas very clear, so.
You know, it's fascinating to me because there is such consistency from the original AK01 back in 2013 today with the Chronomètre Contemporain 2. You really do have that symmetry, you have that uncompromising finish, but you take the finish to a higher level. We were talking before about how you even use thicker bridges so you can draw the bevel farther. Talk a little bit about the standards of finish and how it's done, because a lot of brands, even Geneva Hallmark, they don't have this many interior angles. They don't bevel the inside of wheels. Why go so far, and what is the cost in time and energy of going as far as you do?
You know, I discussed even this morning with a colleague, you know, and he showed me the wheel, you know, and he said that it's difficult. It's really difficult. And I say, yeah, I know, I understand, but you have really to be passionate, because when you see your watch, if at the end it's better, it's more beautiful, you have to do. And again, doesn't mean that it's the best way of doing. For me, I just like it because when I see today this watch, you know, you have this D, but you can look at these wheels, you know, with big and large anglage. That means automatically, you know, when you look at now this watch, you know exactly that it's handmade, you know, because this is, you can't really do in the industry, you know, industrialization, you know, you can't do.
No, a robot can't do it, a mill can't do it, none can do it.
So this is why, for me, visually, I think for somebody who know and don't know watches, when he turn back, you know, he will check and say, oh, this is handmade, you know. So this is what I like.
Now, what's fascinating for me is that you could, in theory, apply for the Geneva Hallmark, You choose not to. The watches are made in Geneva. They're almost entirely crafted in Geneva. There are Geneva hallmark movements that have far less detailing than this. Is that really you saying, like, we're not going to look for that stamp, we're not going to look for that hallmark because we go beyond its standards? You'd rather not be associated with the people who do the bare minimum? Is that what this is about?
You know, sometimes, you know, when you are a small company, you don't think that much about this, you know, you just think about having something, a beautiful movement. We didn't really think about the Poisson de Genève, for example, but, you know, I think again, you know, you don't have to really prove that it's in some way, so I think people can see that
It's like,
really hard.
that's like you say, you can look at these stripes, you can look at these bevels, you can look at this black polish and realize a machine cannot do that. So why go for sort of hollow symbolism if the quality is self-evident?
Yes.
A lot of folks are very confused about how engineers and watchmakers work together. Yesterday I was talking to Michel Navas at La Fabrique du Temps, he used to be with B&B Concept, and he was saying, you know, look, I'm a watchmaker, I work with engineers, I give them the vision, they sort out the physics. What's your relationship like with your engineer when you're taking an idea to the prototype phase?
It's exactly the same. So I had an idea, I'm doing some drawing, we discuss about some mechanism, and they doing all the search, and they doing all the calculation for having this. But honestly, I think I spend a lot of time with them, you know, because it's important again that this movement, this watch correspond to what I want. But this is why also, you know, I have really a young team, because you can really fascinate your guys, you know. And I like it because now more and more my team is, well, you know, we understand each other. They know exactly what I want and what had to be. So with years became a little more easy to understand each other.
So that's a more natural relationship. These are young people, but you've been working together for a few years. When the time comes to bring a new watch into production, do you have to get down to the atelier and teach them how to create each step of the watch? Because you have to create a process before you can make the watch.
Yes, for sure. The process, the quality, you know, and you have so many steps, you know, even just for the anglage. This is why sometimes you have two watches, they have some difference because they are not done by the same watchmaker. But you have to prepare everything now and to doing like everybody can work in the same way. And for sure, I control, I check, and I wanted to show in which way. And for sure, they need that also, you know.
Well, it's understandable, especially given the popularity and the surging demand for independent brands. Amid all of this, do you still get to work at your bench? Do you still get to sit down and enjoy the satisfaction of designing a watch, making a watch, being a watchmaker?
Yes, today I really enjoy it even more, and I'm quite happy and more happy because, you know, slowly I find my balance, you know. When I started, I say, oh, I wanted to be alone because I can do everything, you know. And in reality, when I started like this, you realize that you have to do many things that push you away of the bench, you know. So I say, okay, now I have to learn, but you don't know, you know, when you start, you imagine, you think. And slowly, I find some people who help me to doing some of the things, so I don't manage it. So now I have more and more time on my bench. So this is really the best, and I live at this moment really no stress, no frustration life. You know, I really enjoy, I doing my job, and it's a pleasure. It's really a pleasure.
So now, we have the Chronomètre Contemporain too. Is there a chance down the road that you might experiment with forms that perhaps you haven't applied to your more classical designs? Could we see a calendar watch? Could we see a chronograph contemporain? Do you have the ambition to attack new styles, new functions, and new genres of watchmaking on the Rexhep Rexhepi side?
Yes, for sure. You know, I see. You know, for me, the first chapter was about learning more. You know, to train yourself, to push yourself, and I think we start to be a little more mature. You know, so now we can show that we can doing something. Who hope can stay in the future years and stay in the.
Could we see a chronograph in the future? Is that something that interests you? Because I know a lot of folks have told me, My goodness, you know what he needs to do now is he needs to make it complicated. Does your heart draw you in that direction, or do you feel like that's...
Sure.
Oh,
We did when I started really with complication. It was a base, but it was a complication, and we did, for example, the chiming jump hour was a complication watch, and yes, for sure, we will explore many, but I said to you, we will have many things will come.
coming full circle, by the way, you're wearing the original AK01, which is a power reserve and a tourbillon and a monopusher chronograph all in one, and that was your first watch.
Yes.
So you went from very complicated to very simple, and maybe someday you go back.
For sure. I tell you, we are already working on many other projects. So
I'm excited to see them. And actually, let's bring another person into this discussion. We've talked a lot about your evolution as a watchmaker, the evolution of Akrivia, and the changes through the years. But if you could go back and talk to the 25-year-old version of yourself, if you could give advice to the 25-year-old Rexhep Rexhepi who is just beginning to build the AK01, what advice would you give yourself?
you have so much to learn, honestly. And at 25, I'm really thinking I know many things, and I realized that not really. The idea of what I think will be, it became totally different. Just be patient, enjoy, being open to learn, and being yourself. Really being yourself. I think this is the most important. Listen to your stomach, or I don't know.
Your gut, as we say in the United States.
Yes,
And
yes.
your heart, too.
For sure, because, without passion, you can't doing something good, really. And really be yourself, being open, learn much you can, being humble. That's it,
I don't know if I could be humble if I'd accomplished what he accomplished by 35, but I digress. Now, okay, now the fun stuff. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of your other passions in life, because we know you love watchmaking and we know you love watches. Is there anything else, architecture, art, cars, food, that really moves you, sports?
Food, for sure. No, food, sports. I like boxing, for example. I like Formula One, for example, because I love the technology in that back, But I'm interested on architecture, on art. I'm very open. I'm not unfortunate, but when I start, this workshop, I realized that all my time I was focused and concentrated in my workshop, and I realized I had no more life, no more life. I was focused there, but honestly, I'm trying to push myself to enjoy, to being open, to see what happened around, because, this can give you a lot of ideas, going to sports sometime, you're feeling better, good, so it's important to having other passion. But, I have to say that if some days I can't go in my workshop, I'm feeling a little bad, to say frankly. So I have really to go every day in my workshop.
No, that's wonderful. F.P. Jordan said his hobby is watchmaking. When asked, what do you do for a hobby? He said, watchmaking. You're on the right track, but have you ever boxed? Have you ever done boxing yourself?
Boxing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. See, this is what happens if you pester him about the wait list, guys. Get ugly real fast. But that's fantastic. I think cars, boxing, food, everyone can sort of relate to that. But I had Alain Silberstein in here the other day who said the greatest joy in life is to make your passion your profession, and you've really done that.
I'm a very lucky guy. I'm a very lucky guy to do what again, watchmaking, it's so good because you have so many things to do, You can doing many things, the design, the craft, you can construct. It's so large that it's amazing, and really I'm a lucky guy. Today I don't know what, I never thinking to do something different, really. So I'm a lucky guy.
And we're lucky to have him. Rexhep, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.